Welcome back. My name's Justin Jeffrey, Solutions Architect for IP Fabric. In our first video, we discussed bringing in data from IP Fabric into Microsoft Excel. Today, we're going to take a look on how you can achieve the same functionality within Power BI. If you have not watched the first video, I highly recommend it as we go over the basics and we will be using the same functions. Inside the GitLab repository is a README with all the instructions along with the template files we are using. So right here we have the Excel and the Power BI. Once you open the Power BI, it's going to ask you for your URL. So I'm going to copy and paste that here. And our token, which we discussed in the first video. We can also select a snapshot ID, or we can enter the UUID of a snapshot. So for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use this first one, copy, paste, and load. So here we have a warning about privacy levels. I'm going to set it to organizational. You can ignore it if you would like, depending on what your company requires. So now we have our snapshot data here, and we can see all the columns. We can see these are dates. So what I'm going to do is transform data. So this opens up the Power Query Editor. Like in the first video, we're going to use the query IPF. So I'm going to query get our device information. I'll just do report equals true. We're going to name this devices, and I know it has a duration column of uptime. Then I'm going to invoke another set of data. So I want the inventory interfaces. True. Invoke. We're going to call this interfaces. So the important thing to know about IP Fabric is devices are based on a unique key of SN value, which is the serial number. The serial number is different from the serial number hardware. As you can see, these have virtual context, so we add those to the end of the serial number to make them unique. When we look at the interfaces, we can see that there is an SN column also to map it to a device. And inside here, there is interface name, which is the primary key. So the SN plus int name makes up a primary key. So what I'm going to do is highlight int name and SN with using control. If you right click and press merge columns, it will merge them. However, I want to add a column, and in add a column, there's a merge columns function. So let's just separate these by colon. We're going to name this SN column int name. And here you can see the different steps that are applied. So now if I come over here, what this actually did was backwards. So I want it to be serial number, comma, int name. So now here's the serial number, colon, and the interface name. So let's take a look at a couple more tables. Let's try pooling, routing, BGP. Maybe we want to get some PGP information in here as well. So it looks like there is a duration column as well. So we can add that into our query. So let's copy the BGP neighbors. We're going to query. Let's do reports. Oops, I keep doing that. True. We'll invoke this. We're going to name this BGP. And current state time is the duration column, the state of the neighbor. So that is going to be our fourth. So once we apply that, we'll see current state time as time. And here we have some lists, so they're not showing, but I'm okay with that for right now. In here, I also want to map the serial number, and then I want my source interface. Where is that at? Here it is. So I'm going to highlight these two, add columns, merge columns. We're just going to call it the same, SN source int. Okay. And since I did it in the correct order this time, it looks like it's going to show up that way. And one last thing, we'll talk about expanding lists. So in the README file, it does go over it down here, expanding records, expanding lists. But just to show you, I'm going to use the NTP table. Do reports equals true again, and invoke. We'll call it NTP. So here's the severity columns, which we talked about. And here's the sources. So let's go into our IP fabric under management NTP. As you can see, sources is a list of different sources. So these are comma separated in the GUI. We can't see that, but when we look at the JSON data, we'll be able to see that. So what we're going to do is expand to new rows. So hopefully we can see this guy. So HA2/root. Now we can see the HA2 root has been separated into two rows. Now there's also records, so we're going to expand the records. There is the original column name as prefix. I like keeping that checked because it will do sources.source, sources.sync. If you have multiple columns that you need to expand, it can get confusing if you don't use it. So once I do that, we can see our information. So NTP1, NTP2, and they're both false. And when we look in here, they're both red, signifying they're false. And finally, let us just go in here, close and apply. And like I discussed in the Excel video, your token will be saved in this file. If you publish it to SharePoint, it will also be included in the data source. So please be careful with sharing files and keeping your token your token. Now we can look at all our tables here, and we can even connect them using the model view. So if I zoom out a bit, we have NTP, and it looks like NTP is maps serial number to serial number, one to one. If I double click this, NTP, SN, SN, many to one. So many to one device. Where's my interfaces? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manage relationships. Here we go. We're going to do a new relationship. We'll call it devices. We're going to pick our SN column. We're going to do interfaces. We're going to pick SN. It's one to many, one device to many interfaces. Close. Now, let's modify this one. Let's go manage relationships, BGP, edit. So let's take a look at interfaces. Source int name. And let's map it to BGP source. So one interface to many BGP neighbors. So now we have our data all synced up and modeled, and now you can come on here and start creating your dashboards. So in the devices, we're going to pull out the host name, and maybe I want to know the vendor, for instance, and why not we just throw in uptime as time to see how that looks. And that's not calculated right. I'll have to investigate that later. So now we can look in BGP. And let's say we want to know our neighbor address. Or neighbor host name. That sounds a little better. And neighbor source interface. Source interface. So on this LR10, we can see it's a Cisco device. It has a neighbor of LR11 and R12 on the source interface of FA00. So using Power BI, you can create some cool dashboards, visualizations with charts and graphs, or just combine IP fabric data with other information. So I wanted to thank you for listening to this. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. Or if you find any bugs, new features, this is an open repository. You can come into the Issues tab and create a new issue. And we will be glad to work on it and help you get your application and integration working. Thank you and have a great day.